What's up guys, Intellitech Studios here, and today we'll be doing the full review on the Dirt Devil Breeze Cyclonic. Now this is different than the previous version of the Dirt Devil Breeze, which is known as the Dirt Devil Breeze F1 because it has an F1 filter in the dust cup, and a bit of a different design. The design of this machine is a lot closer to something like the Eureka Whirlwind Lightspeed or Abyssal Power Force Bagless, in terms of the build quality, the targeted price point, and the overall design of the machine. But this essentially was the machine that was replaced by the Dirt Devil Power Max series, but in many ways this machine is a lot better, and I would recommend this for the $50 that these usually sold for, but unfortunately these are no longer available. So this is more so a retrospective review, or to see if it's worth trying to pick one of these up used. So I've been using this machine as my daily driver vacuum for the last 2 weeks now, so it's gotten plenty of usage, and as soon as this review is done, I will be selling it to a customer who was wanting a cheap vacuum. So it will serve its purpose in that regard, but there's a couple reasons why I'm not keeping it. The first is the fact there is no height adjustment, which in some ways is actually good, but in the case of this machine, while I do like not having a height adjustment because it just means that there's less to adjust, it also does cause the belt to wear out quickly. But the one thing I will say is that there are some ways where this machine is actually better than the previous Dirt Devil Breeze. And one of the reasons is that not only is this machine much lighter weight, but the machine is a lot more compatible with different types of carpeting. The reason why I haven't yet reviewed the standard Dirt Devil Breeze is because the standard one does not work on my carpet. It just simply will not work. It just wedges itself into the carpet and will not actually push. This machine does not have that problem. It glides just fine on carpet, and it's very lightweight and does a great job as far as cleaning goes. Now, as far as the actual cleaning performance, this machine cleans much better than the newer Dirt Devils that replaced this. But remember that since this machine is used nowadays, a lot of times it's going to clean a little bit worse since the brush roll will have some wear on it, even if you do replace the belt, which thankfully is very easy, and I do have a video on how to replace the belt on this machine. So it uses a standard Dirt Devil style 4 or 5 belts. You can find those belts everywhere, and the filter is a bit different, but I'll show that in a sec. So right off the bat, the thing that I like about this is it's incredibly lightweight, and the plastic that this has is a very rubbery type of plastic, so this machine is actually fairly sturdy. Now, a lot of people point out the fact that the build quality on the previous Gen Breeze is better, and yes, it is, but they did give you something for it. This lightweight design is actually fairly durable. I've seen few of these actually break. The biggest issue that this machine is prone to having is an issue with the flap on the dust cup, and I'll show you that real quick. So the dust cup releases with a button right here, and we've got a small little button right there that you press to empty the dust cup into the trash. And this lid is held on by a very thin piece of plastic, and these lids are prone to breaking, unfortunately, and the parts are no longer available. So if that breaks on your machine, there's really not much that you can do. So you have a little cyclone in here, this little red cyclone, and it just simply twists into place. So whenever you empty this, so basically that undoes itself like that, and you can twist this cyclone, which got to kind of do it with 2 hands. This twists and it just pulls straight out, and you can very easily wash this cyclone, which is very nice. And once you put it back in there, you can see you can just line it up, and once you line it up, you just push it in and twist, and that puts it in place. Now, one big complaint that I have about this is the quality of filtration. It's very horrible. Now, it's in some ways it's better than the newer Dirt Devils, but you can see after the limited usage, this actual cyclone setup, the holes on this are way too big, so it lets too much big stuff through, and it lets very coarse dust through. You can see how it's kind of bled through on the bottom flap. And there's this little tab right here that's very rubbery, but you just press this and it pops right up. And again, you can see this is really dirty. And finally, you have the filter, which this is from not a lot of usage. This is a F66 filter, and I've only emptied this bin twice. And unfortunately, this filter is just completely caked with dirt. So this is definitely one of those machines where when you empty it, which the max fill line is right there, once you empty it, you want to check the filter, and chances are you're probably going to have to wash the filter every time you empty the machine, or at least every other time. This is what it looks like after just 2 bin fills. So there is not a lot of good filtration here, and there's no post-motor filtration, so you're going to be breathing in all the carbon dust that this machine emits. this one filter is the only way, is the only thing that's in the way of you breathing in all the dirt that you vacuumed up. So while this machine does a great job at picking up dirt, as far as its ability to keep it in the machine, this machine is not a sealed system and there is no HEPA filtration. Even if this filter is technically considered HEPA grade, it's not the final post-motor filter, so it's not effective in that regard. But this filter does easily just lift straight out, and if we look, if we wipe our fingers on this, there actually isn't any dust. So as far as the actual motor intake, the motor intake is still completely clean, thankfully. So there's no issues with that. This filter does seal good enough that stuff doesn't actually get through the motor, which is very important and cannot be said about the early Bissell Clean views. So this filter generally does trap stuff, but the problem is that it just fills up way too quickly. So you're going to really need to wash this filter every single time that you empty the machine, and that's not exactly ideal. And because that is actually one area where, despite this being cyclonic and having a better bin setup for the most part, this in practice actually requires more filter maintenance than either the previous Breeze that this replaced or the newer Power Maxes that replaced this. This brush roller actually does clean very well. Despite the bristles not being the stiffest in the world, they still are decently stiff, and the design of this does a pretty decent job at deep cleaning carpets. So its actual deep cleaning performance is certainly very good. And one issue with these brush rollers is that sometimes they do tangle up in hair pretty easily, but they're easy enough to clean off just simply grabbing the hair and pulling it off. And if you need to disassemble this, the entire base plate is held on with just a few simple Phillips head screws, and that allows you to access the brush roller and change the belt in this unit. We do have height adjustment wheels, but they're not really attached to any height adjustment, so they're just kind of free floating wheels. On the back here we have two buttons. We have our power button, which is a simple foot switch, and we have our handle release button. Now, I'm not a big fan of this, and they actually recycled this design for some Hoovers, because in case you didn't know, Dirt Devil and Hoover, as well as Auric, are owned by the same company. So TTI, the company that owns all three of these, they did recycle this design for a recent Hoover that I reviewed, the Total Home Pet, and this is just as terrible as it is on that Hoover. You have to push on this really hard, but it's actually easier to push on this than that Hoover. So it's also very loud when it snaps up into place, so you have to put a good amount of effort on this in order to pull it back down, but you do have the option to press the pedal again and make it go lower whenever you're trying to get underneath furniture. But keep in mind this canister is a bit large, so there will need to be some clearance, but you can push this pedal again to get it to go underneath stuff. Otherwise, by default, when that area is latched into place, it allows you to pull it up over rugs, but you have to go annoyingly far down in order to actually run this over a runner or a transition strip. So that's a little funky, but it does work. But again, very, very loud when that snaps back into place. So now that we're looking at the back of the machine, we can see the exhaust, which exhausts on both sides and is not filtered. So sometimes that can cause debris to blow away, but usually it's not a problem. And we do have a hose right here, which pulls out. We actually have a little stopper right here, which a lot of people on Bissells and some other Hoovers have complained about debris getting pulled up by the brush and spit out. I've never had that problem, but for those of you that have had that problem, you'll really appreciate this feature. So this actually pops up and blocks this, so that way debris that may get picked up by the brush while you're using the hose doesn't get shot into your face. So, and when you are using the hose, this is just a basic plastic hose. There's not a lot of reach here, and it's also its own custom fitting, so replacing your own attachments is not really going to be a thing, but you can see there is not a lot of reach here. So this is actually less reach than the Maximas of time, but this just isn't enough hose. So even with the extension wand and the crevice tool, which I will demonstrate right now, the extension wand's right here, and the crevice tool fits inside of it. So if we pop on the extension wand and we flip around the crevice tool, so when you're trying to get up into corners and whatnot, there just simply isn't enough space. You can kind of stretch the hose and get up there, but that's with the machine starting to tip over a little bit. So if you're trying to get up into corners, this machine is a bit top heavy since that hose is mounted so high. So there have been times when I've been trying to use this and the machine just falls over. So it's not the best tool experience as far as trying to get up into places. And as far as stairs go, you're not going to be able to get up your stairs with this unless you have a landing in between your staircase. So unless you have a landing, this is not going to be suitable for stairs, but if you do, it could get you by, but it's not the most elegant in the world. So the crevice tool stores right back into the extension wand, very reminiscent of Abyssal, and that clicks right on. There's also this dusting brush right here, which is actually one of the better dusting brushes that I've seen. Unlike a lot of other vacuums in this price range, and unlike newer Dirt Devils, this is actually acceptable to use as a dusting brush, but it also functions as an upholstery brush. So it's still not something that I would dust anything super delicate with, but you won't have to worry about this scratching anything. So it's actually a fairly nice dusting brush. So not really many complaints with that, and that just stores on right there. Although it's not the most secure, it does pop off pretty easily, but it does get the job done. And when you are done with the hose, it clips right on and slides right in there, just like that. So it can be a little awkward, and you do have to bend down to get the hose both in and out, but other than that, it does okay. The cord runs out below here, and you've got a cord clip right here below the hose. But because of how much it sticks out, it is pretty easy to accidentally yank the cord out of it because it doesn't grip it that tightly. Although the one thing that's nice about that is it means it's not going to damage the cord. We do have a upper cord hook that is swivelable, so when you want to quickly release the cord after it's been wrapped up, that's easy enough to do. And the 25-foot cord that this has is very typical of machines in this price range. So there are some Bissels in this price range nowadays that have 23 feet instead of 25, but for the most part 25 is what you're going to find. So not too shabby in that regard, but nothing to write home about. So that's pretty much that. So we'll go ahead and run this real quick, and then we'll go over what the overall thoughts are on this. It is a little loud, but it's not as loud as the older Dirt Devils, but in general Dirt Devil fashion, it will be louder than the equivalent Hoover or Bissell, so be prepared to plug your ears. So overall, the cleaning performance on this is very good in terms of carpeting. It's not recommended for bare floors, but it will clean well on carpets. There are a few problems though. The tool usage is not the best, but unlike a lot of Hoovers in this price range, and even Hoovers that are double and triple the price, this does not have the same flaw where the machine will lean forward and burn your carpet. So it is a better choice than a lot of Hoovers in that regard if you're going to be using the tools. Even though the tools themselves are worse, if you can't use them, then it doesn't really matter. So that is a good point for this, but it's still not as good as the tools that you would find on the equivalent Bissell. Even if this one gives you a bit more extension wand reach, the hose is a little bit less usable because it's a hard plastic hose. It'd be better to use than something like the base model Powerforce Helix, but if you're comparing this to the Bissell Powerforce Helix Turbo or the bagged unit, then those would win over this because those hoses are stretchable. So the cord length is what you'd expect, and the filtration is awful, as what you'd expect in this price range. There are some things that I like about it. It's very lightweight, and other than the bin flap, the build quality isn't the worst, and the handle is actually designed very well. It is much better than the handle on pretty much any other machine in this price range nowadays. This handle is nice and comfortable, and when it's manufactured correctly, it's actually nice to use. And this machine is so easy to push that I can even push and pull it with 2 fingers. So even though it is a full-size upright, it's incredibly lightweight and pretty much the lightest weight upright that I found in this body style. So no complaints as far as the maneuverability. But again, the lackluster filtration just kind of lets it down a little bit, and the fact that the belts wear out prematurely. A lot of other vacuums, you can get away with changing the belts on these every 6 months. This one, I'd recommend doing it every 3, because the belts just wear out more quickly, and the belts are more likely to squeal and squeak over time just because there isn't a lot of protection on that belt. So this machine will require a lot of maintenance, but if you are willing to put up with that, it's a pretty decent machine if you want good carpet cleaning performance, usable tools in a relatively small house, and overall a very quiet and lightweight machine. So if this machine was still for sale for 55 bucks, I would recommend it for some situations. For example, if you're picking this versus the standard base model PowerForce Helix. But if you're comparing this to the Helix Turbo, which is only a few dollars more, I would recommend that over this. And if you're finding one of these used, unless you can find it for 10 or 20 bucks, it's probably not worth it unless it's the only machine that you can find and you desperately need a vacuum. But again, there are plenty of worse options. So anyways, this is Intellitech Studios signing out with my full in-depth review of the Dirt Devil Breeze Cyclonic. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you all have a good one. Peace.